Felix, lucky. I once fell in love with two police dogs in a children's novel. Madam Contest Chair and fellow Toastmasters, have you ever fallen in love with a character in a novel? I often do. As I sat reading in my favourite corner, high up in our willow tree, I looked down on our yard and I realised that we only had winged creatures as pets. Chickens and pigeons and swallows and sparrows and a red-chested cuckoo behind me, which was the reason my dad could never attract finches to his paradise. We even had 10 ducks and a goose, probably because my dad hoped their pond would attract the finches. I once had a four-legged creature as a pet. My step-grandfather, who was my childhood hero, gave me a little lamb as a pet. But after 2 weeks, my grandmother and my father insisted that the lamb destroyed paradise. They were both king gardeners. And the silly little lamb butted my mother with his head when she plucked flowers. So off Hansie went back to the farm. When I got down from that tree, I looked for my parents and asked for a puppy. Like all good parents, they ignored my initial plea for a pet. A few weeks later, I gathered the courage again to ask for a puppy. But this time they forgot that I asked the first time. Since I detest asking for anything twice, I started a silent war in the house. Not that anyone noticed. At the time, speaking wasn't high on anyone's priority list. My dad was busy with his PhD and needed silence. It took me a few years and rereading the novel to ask the right questions. Have my parents ever had a puppy as a pet when they were my age? My dad said he never wanted me to suffer as much as he did when his favourite dog died. And my mother said that she cried for weeks after their puppy died. I reminded them that I survived the brutal killing of my favourite duckling by his own mother drowning him, and that my pet lamb died only a week after they sent him back to the farm. So this time they couldn't resist. I could get a puppy if I would read 7 novels or 7 books about raising a puppy. 8 days later, only because the library would only give me 4 books at a time, I announced that I was now ready to fetch one of the border collie puppies advertised in the local newspaper. My surprised dad sighed and drove me to the SPCA. If you have to have a puppy, he said, you will get a puppy that needs a home. As I walked to the cage on the cold cement floor, the grumpy old supervisor at the SPCA told me that they put down puppies a week after they arrived, unless they were adopted. And they had a huge litter of 11 puppies that arrived 5 days earlier. When I entered the cage, I remembered that the puppy should choose me. 10 of them chose me. So I fell in love with the little one shivering and hiding in the corner. When my mother heard the rescue story of the puppy that no one would ever adopt, she called him Felix, which means lucky or successful in Latin. My school friends thought that I got a cat, and I only understood that years later when my children watched cartoons. Those early days, I had to feed Felix with my hand because he was scared of the enormous yellow dog bowl in the kitchen. He was only 4 weeks old. That first night, my dad said a dog should sleep outside. The puppy and I both cried ourselves to sleep that evening. But the next morning when I woke up, he was curled up by my feet with my dad's jersey on top of him. He never slept outside again. Felix and I had many adventures. In the beginning, he did not want to walk around the block. But the books and Barbara Woodhouse on television insisted that a dog should be walked daily. So I carried him in my arms. And only when he got stronger and braver did he walk. He even jogged around the block with my dad in the evenings. One day, one of my friends found us roaming outside her house and she invited us in for coffee. After that, we often and secretly went for coffee on school days. Not that anyone at home noticed. At that stage, my mother was busy with her PhD. I tried to teach Felix to sit in my bicycle basket so that we could roam farther, but he always jumped onto my lap and I wasn't a very good cyclist, so we gave up on that adventure. Like any good parents, my mother and father looked after Felix after I left home, even though they never wanted a puppy. Years later, when my son turned 10, he asked for a blue-headed Amazon parrot twice. Now what would a good mother who once wanted a puppy, say?